Welcome to the English Pod community. I'm Blake, and in today's episode, we're going to dive into a practice session that will improve both your English listening and writing skills. By listening to real-life stories and examples, you'll not only get better at understanding everyday English, but also learn how to express yourself more confidently. This is a great chance to improve your communication skills for real-world situations, so stay tuned. For those of you new to our channel, we upload English learning videos every day to help you improve step by step. Let me start with a few questions to get you thinking. Have you ever been out for a romantic dinner? Maybe it's a special anniversary, or just a quiet evening with your partner. Picture yourself sitting across from them, enjoying a meal, and sharing stories. What do you talk about? How do you express your feelings? What do you notice around you that creates a warm and comfortable atmosphere? Let me tell you a story from a few years ago. My wife and I were celebrating our anniversary at a little Italian restaurant downtown. It wasn't the most fancy place, but it had a cozy, intimate vibe. We ordered pasta and shared a bottle of wine. What made the evening special was not just the food, but the conversation we had. We talked about our memories, future plans, and, of course, our experiences together. As we were chatting, I realized how much my English had improved from when we first met. Back then, I had trouble expressing myself in detail, but now I could share my thoughts more clearly and confidently. This kind of practice is essential when you're learning a language. The more you hear and use real-life examples like this, the better you'll become at understanding native speakers and expressing your own ideas. It's not just about knowing vocabulary or grammar. It's about feeling comfortable in everyday situations. One thing I noticed during our dinner was how much my wife enjoys listening to me when I tell personal stories. Whether it's about a trip we took or a funny incident that happened at work, storytelling has a way of making conversations memorable. This is something you can practice too. When you're in any situation, even a casual dinner with a friend or loved one, try telling a story. Focus on the details, emotions, and how you describe the setting. It will improve your ability to speak clearly and paint vivid pictures with your words. So, the next time you sit down for a dinner with your husband or wife, think about the conversation you're having. Use that time to practice your English. Listen carefully to the words and expressions they use, and try to imitate their tone and rhythm. Over time, this practice will help you sound more natural and fluent in English. It's all about using real-life situations as opportunities to learn and grow. That night at the French restaurant turned into one of the best conversations my wife and I had in a long time. It reminded me of how important it is to take time to sit down, enjoy a meal, and truly talk. In our busy lives, we sometimes forget to slow down and appreciate these small but meaningful moments. But when we do, we create stronger connections with the people we care about. This is something you can practice too, using English in real conversations that make you feel connected and engaged. As we sat there waiting for our food, I looked around and noticed all the little details in the restaurant. The walls were decorated with paintings of the French countryside. Soft music played in the background, blending perfectly with the quiet chatter of other diners. The warm light from the chandeliers above gave everything a golden glow. It felt as if we had stepped into a little cafe in Paris. The waiter arrived with a friendly smile, placing a basket of freshly baked bread on the table. The smell of warm butter and herbs filled the air, making me even more excited to try the food. I turned to my wife and asked, "What's one of your favorite food memories?" She thought for a moment and then smiled. "I remember when I was a child, my grandmother used to make homemade pasta every Sunday. She would roll out the dough by hand and cut the noodles with a knife. The whole house would smell like garlic, basil, and tomatoes. It was my favorite part of the week because our whole family would sit together, share stories, and laugh." Hearing her describe it in such detail made me feel like I was right there in her grandmother's kitchen. This is the power of storytelling. When you add little details, the smell of the food, the sounds in the background, the emotions you felt, it brings the story to life. And this is exactly what you should practice when speaking English. Instead of simply saying, "My grandmother cooked pasta," you can say, "Every Sunday, my grandmother would wake up early to make fresh pasta from scratch. She would mix the flour and eggs, roll out the dough, and carefully cut each piece by hand. The whole house smelled amazing, and I would sit at the kitchen table watching her work while waiting for my turn to taste the first bite." This kind of description helps the listener imagine the moment as if they were there. When our food arrived at the restaurant, I could tell that it was going to be something special. My wife ordered a creamy mushroom risotto, and I got a classic: steak with roasted potatoes. The presentation was beautiful. My steak was cooked to perfection, with a rich golden brown crust on the outside. The risotto looked smooth and velvety, topped with fresh Parmesan cheese. As I took my first bite, I noticed the layers of flavor, the tenderness of the meat, the slight crispiness of the potatoes, and the hint of rosemary in the sauce. While we ate, we talked about our travels, our dreams, and the little things that made us happy. I told her about a time when I got lost in a small town in Italy, trying to find a famous pizza place. I didn't speak much Italian at the time, so I had to use hand gestures and a few simple phrases I had learned from a travel book. It was a challenge, but it was also a great learning experience. The locals were kind and patient, and after some effort, I finally found the restaurant. The pizza was worth the trouble. It had a thin, crispy crust, fresh tomato sauce, and just the right amount of cheese. It was the best pizza I had ever tasted. Sharing this story made me realize something important. Real conversations are not just about words. They're about emotions, experiences, and connections. And this is something you can practice every day, whether you're talking to a friend, a coworker, or even practicing by yourself. If you want to improve your listening skills, pay attention to how native speakers describe things. Listen to the details they add, the way they use tone and emotion, and the way they make their stories engaging. One way to practice is to listen to a conversation and then try to retell it in your own words. For example, after listening to this podcast, try summarizing the story I just told you. Imagine you are explaining it to a friend. How would you describe the restaurant, the food, and the conversation? Try to include as many details as possible. If you do this often, you'll start to notice that your ability to understand and explain things in English improves naturally. Another great way to practice is to describe your own experiences out loud. Think about a memorable dinner you had. Where were you? What did the place look like? What kind of food did you eat? How did it taste? Who were you with? And what did you talk about? Take a moment to say it out loud or write it down. This will help you become more comfortable using English in real-life situations. Speaking English fluently is not just about memorizing words. It's about being able to use those words to communicate clearly and naturally. And the best way to do that is to practice as much as possible, using real-life examples that matter to you. Whether it's a dinner conversation, a travel experience, or a simple chat with a friend, every moment is an opportunity to. Continuing from where we left off, let me share another personal experience that really helped me improve my English listening and speaking. This happened a while ago when my wife and I decided to have a weekend getaway at a quiet countryside bed and breakfast. It wasn't too far from the city, but it felt like we had escaped to a completely different world. The place was surrounded by green hills, small cottages, and fields full of wildflowers. There was a small lake nearby, and the sound of birds. Singing was all we could hear. On the first evening there, we had a delicious dinner in the cozy dining room of the B&B. The owners were friendly and made us feel like we were at home. We sat by a large window that overlooked the garden, and the soft evening light made everything seem even more magical. The meal was simple but perfect: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a light salad with fresh herbs. Everything tasted so fresh, and we both agreed that this was one of the best meals we had ever had. As we were eating, I couldn't help but notice how my wife described the food. She didn't just say, "This chicken tastes good." Instead, she described it in detail. The chicken is so tender, and the herbs they used really bring out the flavor. The roasted vegetables have a slight sweetness, and the dressing on the salad adds a perfect touch of tanginess. She even talked about the texture of the food, how the chicken was juicy and the vegetables had just the right amount of caramelization. Hearing her describe the meal in such detail made me realize how much more interesting and engaging a conversation can be when you pay attention to the small things. This is something I want you to think about when practicing your English. Instead of just saying a sentence like, "I ate a good meal," try to use more detailed descriptions like, "The meal was flavorful, with each bite of chicken melting in my mouth. The vegetables were perfectly roasted, and the salad had a light, tangy dressing that complemented the meal perfectly." You don't need to use fancy vocabulary to do this, just simple words that help create a picture in the listener's mind. Over time, this will improve your ability to communicate in English and help you sound more natural when speaking. During our dinner, the conversation turned to travel. We started talking about the places we still wanted to visit. I told my wife that I had always wanted to go to Japan. I imagined the streets of Tokyo with its bustling crowds, neon lights, and unique mix of modern and traditional buildings. I also described the peaceful atmosphere of the Japanese countryside with its rice fields and old temples. As I was talking, I realized how much more confident I felt in describing the things I had learned and seen, even if I had never been, to Japan myself. When we talk about things we haven't experienced firsthand, it's important to use our imagination and describe things in a way that feels real to the listener. For example, when talking about a place you've never been, you can say, "I imagine Tokyo to be a fast-paced city with colorful lights everywhere and lots of people walking quickly on the streets. But I also imagine the countryside to be quiet with rolling hills, old wooden houses, and fields of green rice plants." Even though I hadn't been to Japan yet, describing it this way made the conversation feel more engaging, and it helped me practice using English to create vivid pictures. The same principle applies when you're talking about things you have experienced. Whether it's a family event, a holiday, or even just a regular day, think about how you can use language to make your story more interesting. For example, instead of simply saying, "I went to a wedding," you could say, "I went to a beautiful wedding last weekend. The ceremony was held in a lovely church, and the flowers were arranged so elegantly. The bride looked stunning in her dress, and the reception was filled with laughter and music." This kind of detailed storytelling makes your conversation much more vivid and engaging, and it also helps you improve your English by getting comfortable with the language used in real situations. Something else we did during our weekend getaway was take a walk around the property after dinner. As we walked, we talked about the small things that made us happy. We discussed the sound of the leaves rustling in the wind, the peacefulness of the place, and how we felt more relaxed than we had in months. We talked about how, in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, it's easy to forget to slow down and enjoy the little moments. We laughed about how we used to be so busy that we didn't even have time to enjoy a simple walk in nature. But now, being in a quiet place like this, we realized how much we had been missing. When we were walking, I began describing the scenery to her. "Look at the way the light is fading behind the hills. It's like the whole world is slowing down. With the sunset, the air feels so fresh, and I can hear the sound of crickets in the distance. It's so peaceful here." I noticed that as I spoke, I was using more descriptive words to explain what I was seeing and feeling. This made the experience much more enjoyable for both of us. It also made me realize that when we describe things with more detail, it allows the listener to understand and connect with the experience on a deeper level. This is a technique you can use in your own English practice. When you're talking to someone, whether it's about a trip, an event, or even your daily life, try to describe your surroundings, the people, the feelings, and the small details that made the experience special. For example, instead of just saying, "I went for a walk," try, "I took a walk this morning in the park. The sun was shining brightly, and there was a cool breeze in the air. The trees were full of green leaves, and I saw a family of ducks swimming in the pond." This gives the listener more information and makes the conversation more interesting. Also, don't be afraid to use your imagination and talk about things you haven't experienced yet. If you dream of visiting a certain place, tell others about it. Describe the sights, sounds, and emotions you think you'll experience. For instance, if you've always wanted to go to Paris, you might say, "I imagine walking along the Seine River, seeing the Eiffel Tower in the distance, and enjoying a croissant at a small cafe. I think I'd feel so excited and happy to be there." Even if you've never been to Paris, describing it this way helps you practice English and makes your conversation more engaging. While we were sitting there, sipping our drinks, I started chatting with a local couple sitting next to us. They were friendly and shared stories about the town's history. The husband told us how, years ago, the town was much smaller, and there were fewer visitors. Over the years, though, more and more people had started coming to enjoy the natural beauty of the area. He spoke with pride about the changes, but also with a touch of nostalgia, remembering the days when things were simpler. I was listening to him. I realized how powerful it is to really pay attention to what people are saying. Listening closely and asking questions can open up so many interesting conversations. Instead of just nodding and smiling, I asked him to tell me more about the old days, and this made the conversation flow naturally. He went on to describe how the town had grown over time, how some businesses had started, and how people had made the most out of the town's natural resources. Hearing him talk in such detail gave me a deeper understanding of the town's history, even though I had only been there for a short time. This experience showed me how important it is to listen to the details when you're having a conversation. It's not just about hearing words. It's about paying attention to the small things people say and asking follow-up questions to show that you're interested. This is a great way to improve your English listening and speaking skills. The more you practice listening for details and responding with thoughtful questions, the better you will get at understanding and engaging in conversations. One way to practice this is to listen to stories, whether they're told by friends, family, or even in podcasts and videos. The next time you're listening to someone share a story, focus on the little details, how they describe the setting, the people involved, and the emotions they felt. Then, try to repeat the details in your own words. For example, if someone tells you about their trip to the beach, instead of just saying, "It sounds nice," you could say, "I can imagine how relaxing it must have been to sit by the ocean, feeling the warm sand under your feet, and the sound of the waves crashing must have been so calming." As I thought more about this, I realized how often we overlook the power of detailed conversations. In everyday life, we tend to rush through our interactions, focusing only on the essentials. But the more we practice listening to and sharing details, the more we become skilled in describing things with precision. This is especially important in English, as it helps you communicate more clearly and with greater confidence. After we finished our coffee, my wife and I continued our walk around the town. We passed by a small art gallery, and the paintings in the window caught our attention. Inside, we met the artist, who was working on a new piece. We started chatting with him, and he shared how he had been painting for years, inspired by the landscapes around him. He explained that many of his paintings were based on the views he had seen while walking through the hills, and he described the colors he chose to capture the feeling of the scene. the conversation naturally turned to the way art can help us see the world in new ways. I was fascinated by how he talked about the different shades of green in the fields, the deep blues of the sky at dawn, and the golden yellows of the sun setting behind the mountains. His descriptions were so vivid that I could almost see the paintings in my mind. This made me realize that in English, just like in art, it's not enough to use simple words to describe something. You need to paint a picture with your words. This is especially true when you're speaking to someone who is not familiar with the topic you're discussing. When we describe something, whether it's a place, an event, or even a feeling, we should try to include all the senses, not just what we see, but also what we hear, smell, and feel. For example, when describing a walk in the woods, don't just say, "I walked in the forest." Instead, you could say, "I walked through the forest with the sound of leaves crunching under my feet and the scent of pine trees in the air. The cool breeze rustled the branches and the sunlight peeked through the trees, creating patterns on the forest floor." This way, your listener can almost experience the scene with you, and your English skills will improve because you're using a wide range of vocabulary. As we left the gallery, I realized how much my wife and I had learned from talking to the local people. Not only did we get to know the town better, but we also practiced our English in real-life situations. Listening carefully to the way people describe their experiences, whether it's about food, travel, or art, helps you understand how to use language effectively in different contexts. And when you take the time to ask thoughtful questions and share your own experiences in return, it makes the conversation richer and more engaging. This is a great way to improve both your listening and speaking skills. Instead of just listening, passively get involved in the conversation. Ask questions, offer your own thoughts, and try to describe things in detail. Over time, this will help you become more fluent and confident in English. It's not about memorizing words or phrases. It's about practicing how to use language in real situations. The more you practice describing things in detail, the easier it will become. Whether you're talking about a dinner you had with friends, a movie you watched, or a place you visited, take the time to really think about the details and share them with others. This is how you'll improve your English and build your confidence in speaking. And remember, just like in any skill, practice makes perfect. The more you engage in conversations and practice listening closely, the better you'll get at both understanding and expressing yourself in English. All right, let's continue the story and dive deeper into how this simple getaway helped me realize even more about the power of listening and speaking in English. After leaving the gallery, we decided to grab lunch at a nearby restaurant. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small place that served homemade pasta. As soon as we walked in, we were greeted by the friendly owner, a man in his 50s with a warm smile. He told us that he and his wife had been running the restaurant for over 20 years, and that it was their dream to create a place where people could enjoy real, authentic Italian food. We sat down, and as we were browsing the menu, I started talking to him. We talked about the challenges of running a small business and the joy he felt when people enjoyed his food. He shared how he had learned to make pasta from his grandmother when he was just a boy, and how he passed that skill down to his own children, the way he talked about the tradition of cooking, the love he put into each dish, and the satisfaction of serving his customers. It was all so passionate and inspiring. I could feel the energy in his voice as he spoke, and it made me realize that the way people tell stories can deeply impact how we feel and understand the message. In English, it's not just about knowing the right words or grammar, it's about how you tell your story. Whether you're talking about something you've experienced or describing a future event, your tone, energy, and emotion can make all the difference in how your listener understands and connects with you. That's why practicing real-life situations, like talking to someone about their work or a personal experience, is such an effective way to improve your listening and speaking skills. This made me think about how often we only focus on the basics of English, vocabulary, grammar, sentence structure, but forget to put our feelings into what we're saying. You can memorize all the words in the world, but if you don't practice speaking with emotion and energy, it's hard to make an impact in a conversation. And this is where listening becomes even more crucial. When we listen to someone speak with passion and emotion, we can understand not just the words, but also the deeper meaning behind them. As I sat there, listening to the restaurant owner, I realized how much this type of real-world listening practice helps improve both speaking and writing skills. When you listen to someone tell a personal story or share their feelings, you're not just learning new words. You're learning how to express those same feelings in your own conversations. This is a powerful tool for improving English because it helps you understand the emotional aspect of language. After we finished lunch, my wife and I decided to take a walk by the river. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining and there was a gentle breeze. As we walked along the riverbank, we noticed a group of people gathered around a small outdoor market. They were selling homemade crafts, fresh produce, and local products. We decided to stop by, and while we were there, we struck up a conversation with one of the vendors. She was a woman in her 30s, with a friendly smile and an eagerness to talk about her work. She explained that she had started making handmade soaps and candles as a hobby and had turned it into a small business. As she spoke, she described the different scents and ingredients she used in her products, and she even let us try out a few. This interaction was another example of how listening closely can improve your language skills. I could have easily just nodded along while she talked, but instead, I paid attention to the details of what she was saying. I asked questions about the ingredients, about how she learned to make the soaps, and about the challenges she faced as a small business owner. This not only kept the conversation going, but also allowed me to practice using new vocabulary related to business, products, and handmade crafts. By engaging in a deeper conversation, I was able to expand my vocabulary in ways that I wouldn't have if I had only focused on simple, surface-level questions. I was listening actively, asking follow-up questions, and engaging in the conversation, all of which helped me learn how to speak more naturally and fluently in English. It's easy to get stuck in basic phrases like, "How are you?" or "What do you do?" But if you really want to improve your speaking and listening skills, you need to push yourself to ask more detailed questions. Focus on the emotions and experiences people are sharing, and learn how to express your own thoughts in a more nuanced way. This is what will help you sound more natural and confident when speaking English. Later in the day, as the sun began to set, we took a boat ride along the river. The calm water and the colors of the sky were breathtaking, and we couldn't help but admire the beauty of the landscape. As we were talking, I started reflecting on everything we had experienced that day. From the conversations with the restaurant owner, to the vendor at the market, to the breathtaking views we had witnessed, I realized that this trip had taught me something valuable about English learning. It's not just about practicing grammar, exercises, or reading textbooks. It's about getting out there, listening to real stories, engaging in conversations, and using English in real-life situations. Every conversation is an opportunity to improve your listening and speaking skills. The more you practice listening for details, paying attention to emotions, and engaging in meaningful conversations, the more confident and fluent you will become. And it's not just about the words, it's about understanding the context, the tone, and the feeling behind the words. Whether you're listening to someone talk about their favorite hobby, sharing a personal experience, or explaining a complex idea, the more you practice listening closely, the more you will understand how language works in different situations. This is why real-life stories and conversations are such a powerful tool for learning English. As I continued to think about this, I realized how much we can learn from everyday experiences. You don't need to travel to a different country or have a fancy dinner to practice your English. everyday interactions, whether it's a conversation with a colleague, a chat with a neighbor, or even talking to a stranger at a cafe, can provide valuable opportunities to practice your English, listening, and speaking skills. The key is to listen carefully, ask thoughtful questions, and engage in the conversation with energy and enthusiasm. So, the next time you're talking to someone, remember to focus on the details, the emotions, and the story behind the words. Don't just listen passively. Actively engage with the speaker, ask questions, and share your own thoughts. This is how you'll improve your English skills and feel more confident in everyday situations. The more you practice listening to real-life stories and engaging in meaningful conversations, the more you'll improve your ability to understand and speak English. Every conversation is a chance to grow and learn, and the more you practice, the better you'll get at expressing yourself naturally and confidently in English. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep practicing. Your English will improve every day. Let's continue on this journey of how these real-life experiences can transform your English learning. As the boat ride continued, the world around us became quieter, and I could feel a sense of peace settling in. The reflections of the trees and buildings on the water were mesmerizing, and it gave me time to reflect on everything I had learned throughout the day. The conversations, the listening practice, the real stories, these were the moments that truly helped me connect with the language on a deeper level. It wasn't just about memorizing vocabulary or practicing grammar. It was about understanding how English can be used in different contexts, how emotions and tones can change the meaning of words, and how conversations can make us feel more connected to the people we meet. As we sat on the boat, I was reminded of how language learning doesn't happen in isolation. It's not about sitting alone with a textbook or memorizing a list of phrases. Real progress happens when we step outside of our comfort zone and interact with others in real-life situations. That's why I always encourage learners to immerse themselves in conversations as much as possible, whether it's talking with a friend, engaging in a business meeting, or even chatting with someone at a cafe. The more we practice using English in real conversations, the more confident we become. This brings me to a conversation I had a few weeks ago with a friend of mine, Mark. Mark and I have known each other for years, but we had never really talked about our hobbies in depth. One afternoon, we were sitting at a coffee shop, enjoying a warm drink and talking about life, when the topic of hobbies came up. He mentioned that he loved photography, and I was curious to know more about it. As he began to explain his passion for capturing moments, I realized that this was the perfect opportunity to practice both listening and speaking in English. I didn't just ask him what camera he used or how long he had been taking pictures. I really listened to him, asking questions like, "What's the most memorable photo you've taken?" And "How do you decide what to capture in a moment?" I could see the excitement in his eyes as he spoke, and I found myself becoming just as excited about photography as he was. The more he talked about his experiences, the more I understood how important it is to not only listen to the words, but also to pay attention to the passion and emotions behind those words. His excitement for photography wasn't just in the things he was saying, it was in his voice, his body language, and the way he described his experiences. That's something I've learned is incredibly important when it comes to improving your English. When you focus on the emotions and energy behind the language, you don't just learn new vocabulary, you also understand how to use that vocabulary to express yourself in ways that make you sound natural and confident. The more you practice listening to people talk about something they are passionate about, the more you'll be able to express your own thoughts and feelings clearly in English. You'll learn how to adjust your tone, your choice of words, and even your body language to match the emotion of the situation. It's not just about speaking the right words. It's about speaking them in a way that resonates with your listener. Our conversation, I felt inspired to take up photography as a hobby myself. I thought about how it would be a great way to practice English while also exploring my creative side. The next weekend, I went out with a camera and started capturing moments that inspired me. As I walked around, I couldn't help but think about how important it is to use new experiences to fuel your learning. Whether you're learning a new skill, exploring a new place, or engaging in a conversation, every experience is an opportunity to practice your English. And that's what makes language learning so exciting. It's not a task that you have to check off a list. It's a journey that you get to enjoy. The more you immerse yourself in real-life situations, whether it's listening to someone share a personal story or speaking about your own experiences, the more naturally the language will come to you. You'll start to notice that you're not just thinking in English during conversations, but that you're also thinking in English when you're by yourself, when you're making decisions, or even when you're reflecting on your day. Just last week, I had a conversation with my neighbor, David, about a trip he had taken to the mountains. I asked him what he enjoyed most about the trip, and he began telling me about the beautiful landscapes, the fresh air, and the amazing people he had met along the way. He told me a story about a local guide he had met during a hike, someone who had lived in the mountains his entire life and knew every trail and every rock like the back of his hand. The more David talked, the more I realized that listening is not just about understanding the words, it's about understanding the person behind the words. He wasn't just describing a place, he was sharing a personal experience that made me feel like I was there with him, breathing in the fresh mountain air and hiking those trails. That's the magic of good storytelling, and it's something we can all practice when learning English. When we listen to stories, whether they are from a friend or someone we meet for the first time, we are learning more than just new vocabulary. We are learning how to connect with others, how to listen with empathy, and how to express our own thoughts and feelings in a meaningful way. This is especially important when speaking English because it allows you to speak with authenticity. You're not just using the language to get by. You're using it to create real connections with people and share experiences that matter. And that's what this channel, the English Pod Community, is all about. We're here to help you improve your English every day through real conversations and practical examples that you can use in your everyday life. Whether it's improving your listening skills, expanding your vocabulary, or learning to speak more confidently, we're committed to giving you the tools and resources you need to become fluent in English. As I reflected on the stories I had heard that day, from the restaurant owner's passion for cooking to Mark's excitement for photography to David's adventure in the mountains, I realized that language learning is a lifelong journey. It's not something you can master in a few months or even a few years. It's a continuous process of learning, practicing, and growing. Every conversation, every interaction, and every story is an opportunity to become better, to improve your understanding, and to share your own experiences in a way that makes you feel proud. Let's keep this going. I hope you're feeling motivated and inspired by how language learning connects to real-life experiences. The stories we hear and the moments we share with others are what shape us, and they also shape the way we use language. Every time we engage in a conversation, whether it's with a close friend or a stranger, we're absorbing new expressions, new ways of thinking, and new ways to communicate more effectively. Now, let me tell you about another experience I had. A few months ago, I decided to attend a small get-together with some colleagues from work. It was a casual event, just a few people getting together for dinner and drinks. While everyone was busy chatting, I found myself talking to James, one of my coworkers. We hadn't really talked much before, so it was an opportunity to practice my conversational skills. What made this conversation so special was that we had an unexpected connection. James started telling me about his experience moving to a new city a couple of years ago. As I listened, I noticed how much emotion he had when describing the challenges he faced. He mentioned how overwhelming it was at first. The unfamiliar, streets, the different food, the difficulty of making new friends. But what struck me the most was the way he talked about his relationship with his wife and how they both worked together to overcome those challenges. He shared a story about how, after a particularly hard week, they decided to take a weekend trip to the beach. They didn't plan anything elaborate. They simply spent time together, talked, and relaxed. It was during that trip that he said he truly began to feel at home in the new city. I could hear the gratitude in his voice as he spoke about his wife and how much her support meant to him during that time. Listening to him describe that moment, I felt a deep connection to his story. It was a personal and emotional experience that made me appreciate the value of sharing our challenges and triumphs with others. And of course, it gave me an excellent opportunity to practice listening closely and responding thoughtfully in English. When we're learning English, it's easy to focus on the technical side of things, the grammar rules, the vocabulary lists, the pronunciation. But language is so much more than that. It's about connection. It's about creating relationships and telling stories that matter. This conversation with James reminded me of how powerful it is to listen carefully and truly understand the emotions behind the words. As I continued to listen to James, I found myself becoming more comfortable asking questions and contributing to the conversation. I asked him about his favorite memories from that trip to the beach, and he laughed as he told me about a funny incident where they both got stuck in the sand while trying to set up their tent. I could hear the joy in his voice as he retold the story, and it made me realize how storytelling can be such a powerful tool when learning a language. It's not just about understanding the words, it's about capturing the feeling and the atmosphere that those words convey. This is where listening. Practice becomes so important. It's not enough to just understand the words in isolation. You need to understand how they fit together in context and how they change based on the emotions and the story being told. That's how you can sound more natural in English. It's about picking up on tone, pitch, and emotion, and using that to shape your own responses in conversations. Listening to real stories, like the one James shared, allows you to practice understanding the full picture, what the speaker is saying, how they're saying it, and why they're saying it. That's something I want to encourage you to do in your own English practice. Listen to real-life stories, whether they're from friends, family, or even strangers. Pay attention to the way emotions change the meaning of the words. For example, when you're speaking about something happy or exciting, your tone should be upbeat and positive. When talking about something serious or emotional, your tone should reflect that as well. This is an important aspect of speaking English fluently and naturally. It's not just about the words you use, but how you use them. A few weeks after my conversation with James, I found myself in another situation where I had to listen carefully to understand the emotions behind the words. This time, it was at a work meeting. We were discussing an upcoming project, and one of my colleagues, Sarah, began explaining her ideas. She was very passionate about her ideas, but there was a sense of nervousness in her voice. I could tell she was worried about whether her suggestions would be well received. As she spoke, I noticed how her words were precise, but her tone was uncertain. At that moment, I realized how much I've learned about listening for more than just the words. I could hear the anxiety in her voice, and it made me feel more empathetic toward her. Instead of simply nodding and moving on, I decided to acknowledge her feelings by saying, "I can hear that you're passionate about this, and I think it's a great idea. Don't worry, I'm sure we can work through the details together." This response wasn't just about understanding the words she said, it was about understanding the underlying emotion and responding in a way that helped build trust and confidence. In the conversation, this is something you can practice as well. When you listen to someone speak in English, try to pick up on more than just the literal meaning of the words. Pay attention to the tone, the pauses, and the way they express their feelings. Doing this will help you not only improve your listening skills, but also become more confident in expressing your own emotions in English. Remember, language is a tool for connection, and listening is just as important as speaking when it comes to forming those connections. The more you practice listening to real stories and conversations, the better you will become at understanding the context, tone, and emotions behind the words. And the more you understand these subtleties, the more natural and fluent your own English will sound. Just the other day, I had another experience that really emphasized the importance of listening in language learning. I was having a conversation with my friend Anna, who had recently gotten married. She told me about how she and her husband had spent their first anniversary at a cozy little cabin in the woods. As she described the trip, I could hear how much it meant to her. She wasn't just recounting the events. She was reliving the emotions of that special day, the excitement, the love, and the deep connection she felt with her husband. It was one of those conversations that made me think about how language learning isn't just about mastering a set of skills. It's about connecting with others and sharing experiences. By listening carefully to Anna's story, I was able to understand the depth of her feelings, and I was able to respond in a way that made her feel heard and valued. That moment, I didn't just learn new vocabulary or grammar rules. I learned how to be a better listener and communicator in English. That's what makes these real-life stories so valuable. They help us practice listening in a way that's relevant and meaningful. They give us the chance to not only improve our vocabulary and grammar, but also to improve our understanding of how language works in real-world situations. And the more we practice this, the more confident we become in using English to connect with others and share our own stories. And that's exactly why I'm so passionate about this channel, the English Pod community. We're here to help you improve your listening, speaking, and writing skills every day through engaging conversations, real-life examples, and practical tips that you can use in your own life. Whether it's improving your listening skills, expanding your vocabulary, or learning how to communicate with confidence, we're committed to helping you every step of the way. Every story, every conversation, and every experience is an opportunity to learn and grow. The more you immerse yourself in real-life situations and practice listening and speaking in English, the more natural it will become. Keep listening, keep practicing, and keep improving your English every day. You're on the right path, and every step you take brings you close. Thank you for sticking with me. Let's keep going. The process of learning a new language can feel like a long journey, but the beauty is that every day we're making small strides toward our goal. And it's those moments, those little conversations we have that shape our path forward. I think it's important to realize that when we learn English, we aren't just learning the structure of the language, we're learning about people, cultures, and the experiences that make us who we are. Every conversation, whether it's casual or more formal, has its own rhythm, its own flow. And the more we listen and practice, the better we get at picking up on those rhythms. Let me give you an example of something that really brought this home for me. A couple of months ago, I had the chance to visit a small village on the outskirts of the city. The place was known for its peaceful atmosphere and close-knit community. As soon as I arrived, I noticed the difference in the way people interacted with each other. The language wasn't just about communication, it was about connection. I was introduced to John, an elderly man who had lived in the village for over 50 years. We sat down at a small cafe, and I asked him about life in the village. At first, it seemed like a simple question, but John's response was anything but simple. He started telling me about the history of the village, the changes it had gone through over the years, and the people who had come and gone. As he spoke, I realized that he wasn't just sharing facts, he was telling the story of his life and his community. His words were rich with emotion, and I could feel the pride he had for the place he called home. As he spoke, I was struck by how much of what he was saying wasn't about the individual words themselves, but about the way he spoke. There was a sense of nostalgia in his voice, a quiet reverence for the memories he held. I knew that this wasn't just an ordinary conversation. It was an exchange of life experiences, a sharing of a piece of history. Listening to John's story, I realized something important. Language is a living thing. It's not just about grammar or vocabulary. It's about connecting with people on a deeper level. When we're learning English, we need to focus on more than just the words. We need to listen for the meaning behind the words, the emotion, the intent, and the story that the speaker is trying to convey. One of the things that helped me during this conversation was remembering that language is about context. John's story wasn't just a random collection of facts. It was tied to his life experiences, his emotions, and his relationships with the people around him. In the same way, when we're learning English, it's essential to understand the context in which words are used. The same word can mean different things depending on the situation. For example, think about the word love. If you say, "I love my husband," it's very different from saying, "I love pizza." The meaning behind the word changes based on the context, the emotions involved, and the person speaking. When you're learning English, paying attention to these nuances can make all the difference in understanding and speaking the language. Naturally, it's not just about knowing the right words. It's about knowing how and when to use them. And that's why listening to real-life conversations and stories is so helpful. It gives you a chance to hear how words and phrases are used in different contexts, helping you better understand the subtleties of the language. In fact, after that conversation with John, I started to pay more attention to how people spoke in different situations. Whether it was at work, at home, or out with friends, I noticed that people didn't just talk. They communicated. And they communicated in a way that reflected who they were, their experiences, and their emotions. The more I listened, the more I realized that language is about more than just words. It's about understanding people. That's one of the things I love about this channel, the English Pod community. It's not just about learning grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary. It's about understanding how people use language in real, everyday situations. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. Listen closely. Pay attention to the way people speak, the way they tell their stories, and the way they express themselves. The more you practice this, the better you'll get at using English to connect with others in meaningful ways. Take, for example, a conversation I had with a friend of mine, Rachel. Rachel and her husband recently celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary, and they decided to take a trip to the mountains. They didn't do anything fancy, just a quiet weekend getaway to reconnect. When Rachel told me about the trip, I could hear the happiness in her voice, but there was also something deeper there. She talked about how, over the years, they had learned to support each other through both good and challenging times. She mentioned how important it was to take moments like these to simply be together, without the distractions of daily life. Because as she spoke, I couldn't help but think about how much this story reflected not just her relationship with her husband, but her own personal growth. The way she described their relationship was filled with love and gratitude, but it was also filled with the recognition that relationships take work, patience, and understanding. Listening to Rachel's story made me think about my own relationships and how I can be more mindful of the small moments that make them special. This is another important lesson in language learning. Listening to real-life stories helps us understand not just the language itself, but the emotions, values, and cultural nuances that come with it. Language is deeply connected to culture, and by listening to these personal stories, we can learn more about the people who speak it. It's not just about learning to speak English. It's about learning to understand the world from different perspectives. You might also be wondering, how can I apply this to my own English practice? It's simple. Start by listening to stories that matter to you. These could be personal stories from friends or family, or even stories from podcasts, books, or movies. The key is to listen actively. Don't just focus on understanding the words. Focus on understanding the feelings behind the words. Pay attention to how people express themselves, how their voices change depending on the topic, and how they use language to connect with others. Another great way to practice this is to share your own stories in English. When you tell a story, whether it's about a trip you took or an experience you had, try to capture the emotions and the details that made it memorable. This will not only help you improve your speaking skills, but it will also help you practice using language in a way that feels natural and authentic. I've noticed that the more I practice listening to real-life stories and sharing my own, the more confident I become in my English skills. It's no longer just about memorizing words or learning grammar rules. It's about using language to connect with others, share experiences, and express myself in meaningful ways. And that's something I want you to remember as you continue your language learning journey. The more you listen, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the more confident you'll become in your ability to communicate in English. One of the things I've learned over the years is that learning a language isn't just about memorizing vocabulary or grammar rules. It's about learning to think in that language, and that takes practice. For example, I once traveled to a country where English wasn't the primary language. At first, I struggled to communicate, but over time, I started thinking in English without even realizing it. I remember walking down the street, thinking about the people I'd met that day, and the things I had seen, and I was thinking in English. It wasn't just about translating from my native language. I was processing everything in English. That experience really taught me how important it is to immerse yourself in the language. When you surround yourself with English, whether through podcasts, conversations, or reading, you begin to internalize the language. This makes it easier to understand and speak it naturally. You start thinking in English, which is exactly what you need to do if you want to speak fluently. But I'll be honest, learning English can be difficult, especially when you're trying to understand different accents and dialects. One of the most challenging things for me was understanding different ways people speak English in various parts of the world. For instance, when I first listened to English spoken in the UK, I had a hard time understanding the accents. They spoke much faster than I was used to, and some of the words sounded different from what I was familiar with. But over time, I learned to listen more carefully. I realized that understanding English isn't just about knowing the words. It's about learning to recognize the way people speak in different situations. This is another reason why listening to real-life stories is so helpful. When you listen to someone's story, you're not just learning vocabulary, you're learning about the way they speak. You're learning how they express themselves, how they tell stories, and how they use language to communicate their thoughts and feelings. And that's something you can't learn from a textbook. For example, when I listened to a colleague of mine, Tom, talk about his childhood, I noticed how he used language to convey humor and emotion. Tom was telling a story about a family road trip they took when he was young. As he spoke, he used vivid descriptions of the places they visited and the funny things that happened along the way. But what made his story really stand out was the way he used language to create a sense of nostalgia. He said, "It wasn't just the places we went. It was the feeling of being with my family, laughing and talking together." The way he described the trip wasn't just about the events, it was about the feelings those events stirred in him. Listening to Tom's story helped me understand how to use language to express feelings, not just describe events. And this is an important skill to develop when you're learning English. Whether you're telling a story, giving a presentation, or having a conversation, It's not enough to just use the right words. You need to use the right tone, pace, and emotion to make your words come alive. In every conversation, there are moments where we can learn something new about ourselves and the world around us. It's not just about getting the words right, it's about understanding the context in which they're used. Imagine this. You're at a dinner party, sitting next to someone who is telling a fascinating story about their life. At first, you might focus on catching every word, making sure you understand everything. But after a while, you realize that understanding the emotions and the ideas behind the words is just as important as knowing what they mean. I remember a time when I was at a dinner party with some close friends. One of them, Anna, was talking about a difficult decision she had to make a few years ago. She was sharing a personal story about how she and her husband had to decide whether to move to a new city for work. As she spoke, I could hear the tension in her voice. There was a mix of excitement and uncertainty about the future. At first, I focused on understanding the details of her story, the job offer, the new city, the challenges she faced. But as she went on, I realized that what made her story powerful wasn't just the facts, it was the way she expressed her feelings. Her voice shifted when she talked about how she and her husband supported each other through that decision. She said, "We didn't know what the future would hold, but we knew that whatever happened, we would face it together." That's when it hit me. The power of language goes beyond the words we use. It's about the emotions we convey and the connections we make with others. Anna's story wasn't just about a job offer or moving to a new place. It was about love, trust, and the strength of a partnership. And that's something we can all relate to, no matter where we're from or what language we speak. This brings me to an important point. When we learn English, we're not just learning how to speak. We're learning how to connect with others, how to share our own stories, and how to understand the stories of those around us. Language is the bridge that allows us to connect with people, no matter where they're from. And it's in these connections that we truly learn. Now, you might be wondering, how does this relate to improving my English listening and speaking skills? Well, the key is to practice listening to and understanding not just the words, but the emotions and intentions behind them. The more you practice this, the easier it will be to understand native speakers in real-life situations. For example, when you're listening to a podcast, don't just focus on the vocabulary being used. Pay attention to the tone of voice, the pace of speech, and the feelings being expressed. This will help you improve your listening comprehension and make your own speech sound more natural. Think about how you would respond if someone told you a personal story, like Anna's. Would you focus just on the details of the story, or would you also try to understand how the person felt while sharing it? The same principle applies when you're learning English. Listening to real-life stories in English is one of the best ways to improve your skills, because it helps you understand the emotional context of the language. For example, when you're listening to someone talk about a happy experience, you'll notice that their tone is likely upbeat and enthusiastic. On the other hand, when someone is talking about a sad or stressful situation, their tone might be more subdued or serious. These subtle differences in tone can tell you a lot about the speaker's emotions and the meaning behind their words. And the more you practice recognizing these differences, the better you'll become at understanding English in real-life situations. This is exactly what I try to emphasize in the English Pod community. Each episode gives you the opportunity to listen to real-life stories and conversations, and in the process, you get a deeper understanding of how the language works in different contexts. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Let's continue by diving even deeper into the power of listening to real-life stories and how it can shape your English skills. As we've been discussing, understanding English isn't just about memorizing grammar rules or learning vocabulary. It's about connecting with people through stories. Each story, whether it's about love, friendship, challenges, or triumphs, offers you a glimpse into someone else's world. And when you listen carefully to these stories, you begin to see how language is used in different ways to express emotions, build relationships, and share experiences. Let me take you back to a conversation I had with my close friend Mike a few years ago. Mike and his wife had just returned from a vacation in the mountains, and they couldn't stop talking about the trip. As I listened to them, I noticed something really interesting. Mike didn't just talk about the amazing views or the fun activities they did. He spoke about the emotions he felt during the trip, the peace he found in the quiet of the mountains, the joy of spending time with his wife, and the simple moments that made the trip memorable. He said, "It wasn't about the places we saw or the things we did. It was the feeling of being present, being with my wife, and just taking in the beauty around us. That's what made the trip special." What struck me about this conversation was how Mike used language to convey emotions, not just facts. He didn't just describe the scenery, he expressed how it made him feel. And this is something that you can learn from when practicing English. It's not just about using words correctly, it's about using those words to express what's in your heart and mind. Mike's story was about more than just a trip. It was about the connection he had with his wife and the deep appreciation he had for the simple moments in life. Now think about how you would tell a similar story in English. If you were sharing a memory of a special trip with your partner, how would you express the emotions you felt during that experience? Would you focus on the beautiful sights, the activities, or would you also share the feelings you experienced? At that moment, this is where the true power of storytelling comes in. When you learn to tell your story with emotion and detail, you'll not only improve your speaking skills, but you'll also make a stronger connection with your listeners. When I was learning English, I found that one of the best ways to practice was by listening to real-life conversations, like the one with Mike and his wife. Hearing how people express their emotions, share their personal stories, and use language in everyday situations helped me understand the nuances of the language. And as I practiced, I started to realize that the more I listened, the more I understood. Not just the words, but the feelings behind them. This is a huge part of becoming fluent in English, learning how to connect emotionally with the language. Another example I'd like to share comes from a conversation I had with my cousin, Lisa. Lisa is a professional chef, and one evening we were talking about her experience preparing a special meal for her husband's birthday. She told me how she spent hours planning the menu, selecting the perfect ingredients, and preparing each dish with care. But what really caught my attention was the way she described the feeling she had when her husband first tasted the food. When he took the first bite, his face lit up, she said, and I knew everything was worth it. It wasn't just the food, it was the love and effort I put into it. Lisa's story really made me think about how powerful language can be when you use it to express love, effort, and personal connections. In this case, the food wasn't just about taste, it was about the emotions involved in creating it. And when you listen to stories like Lisa's, you start to see how the use of language changes depending on the situation. In this case, Lisa wasn't just describing the food, she was describing the feelings she had when she created something for someone she cared about. That's a key lesson in language learning. The words you choose can convey so much more than just the surface level of what you're talking. When learning English, one of the best ways to get better is by listening to conversations where people talk about meaningful experiences like these. Whether it's a romantic dinner, a special moment with family, or a personal achievement, these stories provide a rich opportunity to practice understanding both the literal meaning and the emotional context behind the words. And the more you expose yourself to real-life conversations, the easier it will become to pick up on these subtle differences in tone, emotion, and intention. Now, I want you to think about your own experiences. Can you recall a time when you had a meaningful conversation with someone? Maybe it was about a special trip you took, a celebration with your spouse, or a personal challenge you overcame. When you think about that conversation, what stands out to you? Was it the details of the story, or was it the way the person expressed their emotions and feelings? This is an important part of learning English. It's not just about repeating what you hear. It's about learning how to use language to express your own emotions and connect with others. And in order to do that, you need to be able to understand how others use language in different contexts. As you continue your language learning journey, I encourage you to pay attention to the emotions behind the words. Listen carefully to how people tell their stories, and notice how their language reflects their feelings, whether it's excitement, sadness, love, or fear. Language is a powerful tool for expressing these emotions. The more you practice listening to real-life conversations, the more you'll learn how to use language in meaningful ways. I'm glad you're still with me. Let's dive even deeper into how real-life stories can change the way we use English. There's something special about hearing personal experiences. It's not just the words that are important, but how they make you feel and how you can relate to them. That's what we'll explore today as we continue with this journey in improving your English. As you listen to these real-life stories, you begin to notice how stories evolve with the language. For instance, a while back, I had a conversation with my cousin Sarah about a surprising experience she had while planning her wedding anniversary with her husband. She told me how she tried to make everything perfect, arranging a surprise dinner, finding the right place, and even making sure the little details were just right. But what really caught my attention was the moment she shared the joy she saw in her husband's eyes when he realized she had put in so much effort to make the night special. "I knew that all my efforts were worth it," she said, "when I saw him smile like that. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about the care I put into it, the surprise, and the happiness we shared." This was a beautiful example of how love and care can be expressed through actions, and Sarah's use of language to describe that moment was just as powerful as the experience itself. She didn't just talk about the dinner, she painted a picture, with words explaining the significance behind the small gestures, and that's something we can all learn to do as we improve our English. When we listen to stories like this, we understand how language is used to connect with others on a deeper level. The more I reflect on this conversation with Sarah, the more I realize that the key to becoming fluent in English isn't simply about knowing how to string words together. It's about knowing how to express those deeper emotions and moments in a way that resonates with others. And when you listen to others share their personal stories, you start to recognize the importance of not just saying the right words, but of choosing words that convey the meaning and feeling behind them. One of the most fascinating aspects of learning English is the way we can hear and understand a range of emotions through language. Think about it. When you listen to someone talk about their life, you aren't just hearing facts or details. You're hearing a story. And that story carries emotions like happiness, sadness, fear, excitement, and love. And when you understand how to express those emotions in English, it makes your conversations feel more authentic and real. Let me tell you about a time when I went on a weekend getaway with my wife. We decided to go to a small, quiet town by the coast. The idea was to escape the noise and busyness of the city and just spend some quality time together. I remember one evening, we went for a walk by the beach. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange as the sun began to set, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was incredibly calming. We didn't talk much during that walk. It was one of those rare moments when words weren't needed, and the silence was just as comforting as the sound of the waves. That experience made me realize how sometimes it's not about saying anything. It's about the emotions you feel in a moment and how they are expressed without words. However, when I later shared this moment with a friend, I used language to convey how peaceful and special it was. I said, it was like time slowed down, and we were just two people, walking together, taking it all in. That's a simple example, but the emotions behind the words make it feel meaningful. When you're learning English, it's crucial to realize that it's not only about learning vocabulary and grammar, it's about learning to connect with others through your words, through the feelings and experiences you want to share. Now, let's think about how we can apply this to improving your English. One of the best ways to improve both listening and speaking skills is by practicing with stories like the ones I just shared. Listen to how the speakers use language to describe feelings, actions, and experiences. Pay attention to the adjectives they use, the way they structure their sentences, and the expressions that reflect emotions. This helps you understand not only the meaning behind the words, but also the different ways you can express yourself. When it comes to speaking practice, try to tell your own stories with the same level of detail and emotion that you hear in real-life conversations. This will help you sound more fluent and natural. You don't need to have a perfect vocabulary. What matters is the way you express yourself and make your listener feel the emotions you're sharing. And the more you practice this, the more confident you'll become in speaking English. Finally, let's not forget the importance of listening actively. When you listen to someone else's story, don't just focus on the words. They are telling you more than just a narrative. They are showing you how they felt during the experience, what they learned, and how it changed them. This is why it's so important to listen carefully and thoughtfully. It's not just about hearing the words, it's about understanding the message and the emotions behind them. This type of listening will help you not only improve your comprehension, but also help you engage with others on a deeper level. As you continue your English learning journey, remember that storytelling isn't just about learning grammar and vocabulary. It's about learning to connect with others, share experiences, and express emotions through language. Keep practicing, keep listening, and keep sharing your own stories. That's the key to becoming fluent in English and truly mastering the language. A friend of mine, David, once told me about a time he and his wife went on a romantic dinner to celebrate their wedding anniversary. He described the whole evening with such emotion that even though it was just a dinner, it felt like a story I was part of. He said, "The restaurant had dim lighting, soft music, and the smell of fresh flowers in the air. When I looked at her, I saw how much she meant to me in that moment. It wasn't just the dinner, it was the entire experience, being there together, enjoying the little things." The way David spoke made me feel like I was right there with him at the dinner table, experiencing those emotions alongside him. This is another great lesson for improving your English. When you listen to these stories, notice how the speakers use sensory language, describing what they see, hear, smell, and feel. These descriptions help paint a vivid picture in your mind, making the story come alive. And when you practice storytelling in English, try to use sensory details in your own stories. Whether you're talking about a special moment with your spouse or recalling a fun experience, adding these details will make your speech richer and more engaging. I remember when I was just starting to improve my English, I would listen to stories like these and try to repeat them. But what I learned along the way was that just repeating the words wasn't enough. I needed to understand why the speaker chose certain words and how those words made the story feel real. For example, when David described the ambiance of the restaurant with phrases like dim lighting and soft music, he wasn't just describing a place. He was creating an atmosphere that invited the listener into the story. It wasn't just about the dinner, it was about the emotions and the experience that came with it. And this is something that you can use to improve your own English. When you speak, think about how you can use details like this to share not just what happened, but how it felt. Did you feel relaxed, excited, surprised, or nervous? Share those emotions with your listeners. This will help you become more expressive and help your listener connect with your story on a deeper level. Another important aspect of listening practice is focusing on how stories are told. We all know that the way we tell a story can affect how the listener understands and feels about it. For instance, let's say someone is talking about their first date with their spouse. If they tell the story in a way that focuses on just the facts, like, we went to a restaurant, ate dinner, and then went home, the story feels flat. But if they tell it with excitement, describing how nervous they were, the little details about the conversation, and how the moment felt, the story becomes alive. The same goes for your own English practice. As you listen to stories, think about the emotions behind the words and how those emotions can be expressed through language. Pay attention to the tone of the speaker's voice, the choice of words, and how they create a connection with their listener. All of these things are important for improving your speaking skills as well. When you learn how to use language to evoke emotions and create a connection, you'll be able to tell your own stories more effectively and naturally. This moment is more than just a hike. The way I describe it gives you a sense of the place, the feeling, and even the atmosphere. And that's exactly what you need to pay attention to when you listen to English stories. Think about the emotions behind the words and notice how certain descriptions help the listener form a picture in their mind. By practicing listening to these kinds of stories, you'll not only improve your listening skills, but also learn how to tell better stories yourself. Another part of storytelling that we often overlook is the way we build up to the most important moments. Sometimes, the real beauty of a story is in the anticipation of something special. For instance, imagine I'm telling you about a surprise dinner I planned for my wife's birthday. It wasn't just about the dinner itself. It was the thought and effort that went into planning the surprise. Let me walk you through it. I could start by saying, I wanted to make this birthday special for her, so I decided to take her to a restaurant we had visited on our first date. It was a cozy place, with candles on the tables and soft jazz music in the background. I didn't tell her where we were going, just that we were going out for a nice dinner. She was curious, and I could tell she was excited. In this story, I'm building the anticipation. The detail about the candles and jazz music sets the mood, and the suspense of not knowing where the dinner will be keeps the listener engaged. When you're telling your own stories, especially in English, it's important to think about how you can build the narrative. Start with small details that create a picture, then gradually add in more to heighten the emotion and make the listener eager to hear what happens next. This is something you can practice too. When you're telling a story in English, think about how you can start with little details, slowly revealing more as the story progresses. This approach makes the story more dynamic and keeps the listener's attention. Also, don't forget that real-life stories often involve both the good and the challenging moments. Not every experience is perfect, and it's those imperfections that often make a story more relatable and human. I remember another time when my wife and I were celebrating our anniversary. I had planned a surprise picnic at the park, but as luck would have it, the weather turned suddenly and we were caught in the rain. Instead of getting upset, we decided to laugh it off and enjoy the moment anyway. We ran to the car, drenched, and still managed to make the best of the situation. Could share this story by saying, we were so excited about the picnic, but just as we sat down on the blanket, the clouds rolled in. It started to rain heavily, and we couldn't stop laughing at how unexpected it was. We grabbed everything and ran to the car, laughing the whole way. It wasn't the perfect picnic I had imagined, but it ended up being even more memorable because of the way we reacted. This kind of storytelling adds authenticity. Life isn't always about perfect moments. It's about how we handle the unexpected and find joy in even the challenging situations. When you listen to stories like this, it teaches you to find the humor and positivity in any situation, and that's a great lesson for both English and life. Now, let's dive even deeper into the topic and continue exploring how listening to real-life stories can help improve your English skills. When we talk about improving our English, it's easy to think of only grammar rules, vocabulary lists, and memorizing phrases. But the true power of language comes when we use it to express feelings, share experiences, and connect with others. I always say that learning English isn't just about speaking correctly, it's about speaking meaningfully and being able to share parts of yourself with others in a way that resonates. This is where storytelling plays a key role. As an example, let me tell you about a moment I shared with my wife, Jessica, on a quiet evening. We had just finished a busy week, and we were looking for some time to relax. After a simple dinner at home, we decided to step outside and sit on the porch, enjoying the cool night air. The sky was clear, and you could see the stars shining bright above us. There was something magical about that moment. The peace of the evening, the comfort of being with someone you love, and the quietness of the world around us. But instead of just telling you about the moment as I just did, let me show you how you could express this in more vivid detail. I could say something like, "The cool breeze kissed my face as I sat with Jessica on the porch. The sounds of the evening were soft and distant. Above us, the stars twinkled like little diamonds scattered across the black velvet sky. There was a sense of peace, an unspoken connection between us, as we shared a quiet moment, enjoying each other's presence." Notice how I added sensory details, like the cool breeze and the distant sounds, and emotions, like peace and connection. This not only paints a clearer picture for you as the listener, but also helps make the story feel more real. When you practice your English listening, notice how speakers add these layers of description to make the story more engaging. These layers are what make a story memorable, and when you listen to these kinds of details, they help you build a richer vocabulary and a better sense of expression in your own speech. The thing about stories like these is that they don't need to be extraordinary to be powerful. Simple moments, like a quiet evening with a loved one, can be just as meaningful and memorable as grand experiences. The key to connecting with others in English is learning how to take these moments and express them with the right words. That's where you'll start to feel more comfortable and confident in speaking. The more you listen to others telling their stories, the more you learn about how to craft your own stories. The tone of your voice, the choice of words, and the pace of your sentences all contribute to how your listener will feel when they hear your story. Imagine if I were telling you this same story in a rushed, monotone voice, without the pauses, or emphasis on the important details. It would lose its magic, wouldn't it? For example, when I tell you about the stars twinkling in the sky, I could emphasize the word twinkling and slow down a little to allow the image to sink in. The same goes for other emotions you want to convey. By adjusting your tone and pacing, you can communicate excitement, happiness, or even sadness without having to say a single word about it. The voice becomes a tool for storytelling, and when you practice this, it makes your English sound more natural and fluent. Let's focus for a moment on another type of real-life situation. A while ago, I went on a hiking trip with some close friends, and it was an experience I'll never forget. It wasn't a very difficult hike, but what made it so special was the connection I felt with nature, my friends, and even myself. We walked through a dense forest, the trees towering above us, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under our boots. Every so often, we would stop to admire a beautiful view, and I remember one particular spot where we had a clear view of a valley far below with mist rising from the trees like smoke from a fire. When I described this experience, I could focus on the beauty of nature, the peacefulness of the forest, or the friendship I shared with my hiking buddies. For example, I might say, as we made our way through the forest, the tall trees seemed to whisper in the wind, and the path beneath our feet was covered in crunchy autumn leaves. When we reached the top of the hill, the valley stretched out. Below us, mist hovering above the trees like a soft white blanket. By listening to stories like these, you not only improve your comprehension and vocabulary, but you also learn how to express your own experiences more clearly. So, take every opportunity you get to listen to real-life conversations, whether it's a personal story from a friend, a podcast episode, or even a movie. The more you practice, the better you'll get at understanding how English works in the real world.